Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, coming to you 6 days a week as we interview whitetail experts and hear their traditions and personal stories of the hunt. Learn more about the latest gear, discover proven tips, and the latest strategies so you can make your next hunt a success. Now, here's your host, Bruce Hutchin.
Hey, folks. Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. And we're sort of going to Western New York, but actually we're going to Colorado because that's where Brooke is. And her and her dad, Scott Jordan, Brooke Jordan Dzara, and her dad, Scott Jordan, are the host of CRCS Outdoors. Brooke, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bruce. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, folks, and if you caught the Facebook Live with Brooke, then you know a lot about CRCS Outdoors. But we're going to start the show right there because it's a unique opportunity for people, school districts, school systems to get involved and mentor kids about the outdoors. And so, Brooke, let's talk about the start of the program and where it is today.
Okay. So if you didn't catch the Facebook Live, I'll go over just a little bit more about the beginning of the program. So CRCS Outdoors began in 1993, the year I was born, when my dad started teaching at Cuba-Rushford Central School in Western New York. And he had a group of 8th grade boys approach him they loved his science class. He was teaching shark dissections. And my dad asked, what would they want to do extra outside of school? And they said they wanted to do something big. So, long story short, they have created a working fish hatchery, a wildlife center, a wetland facility, a man-made pond with a research facility, a whitetail deer research facility, all at a public high school. On top of that, so my dad on top of that is still an 8th grade science teacher, still doing shark dissections. And all of the things that he did with the 8th grade students continues. The Fish and Wildlife program is offered 2 periods a day to all of the kids in the high school. And he is also still doing, Envirothons. If you've ever heard of the Envirothon, it's a environmental science exam competition. So that's something they do every year. We actually bring hunters, fishermen, into the classroom to teach hunting and fishing lessons in class at a public high school, which is pretty amazing. And then the last thing is the television show is run right out of our classroom. So there are student editors that are able to actually do a lot of the work on our national television show.
So to wrap your arms around it, their TV show is seen on Pursuit Channel. They get approximately 50,000 viewers on each show. They're in 7 seasons. And it isn't just classroom because your dad films all around the world.
Yes. So outside of the classroom, my dad, since I remember, has been taking people on trips around the world. So he's never missed a summer. He's been going to New Zealand since I was in 5th grade. Alaska earlier than that. And then we have done Africa during the year. We'll do things in Florida. He'll take kids gator hunting in Florida, places like that. So we have been all over the world, and that momentum just isn't stopping. And the hard part is nothing is funded. So many of the things that they do, like the programs, they'll write grants. A lot of times kids raise their own money to go on the trips, and the trips are open to adults and children, but obviously my dad can get the best deals for kids at cool places like that.
That's amazing. And is he in New Zealand right now, or is he home?
He just got home today, so I'm going to sign him up for his own podcast as well.
Yay!
But I run all of the social media, so my dad's like, you got to set it up for me if you want me to do something. So because he's been gone for 10 days. They were actually with another television show, Bone Cold TV. If you've heard of them, they are actually mostly online now, and they went together and took students with them.
I think that's just amazing. We hear a lot of different chatter, social media, wherever, about about hunting, not hunting, anti-hunting. Is it good for kids, bad for kids, guns in school and all that. And then, we find somebody like yourself and your dad that's, making a difference in a super, super positive way because one, it's a curriculum. It's curriculum high school. And then they get the journey, the experience. And I had a guest the other day, we were talking about, hunting isn't always about the kill. It's about the journey. And let's talk about your journey as a hunter, as a woman who grew up in a hunting family, but you won some awards as a youth. And why did you win those awards?
So the major award, which is the Safari Club and Cabela's Youth Hunter of the Year, to me felt kind of like winning the Miss America of hunting. I mean, it was just so amazing. And there's a couple different qualifications for that award. One, you have to be a role model. Two, in a part of that, you have to have community service and a lot of outdoor experiences as well. You got to have the grades. So it's really kind of a well-rounded award is kind of the point. So basically that hunters are not just hunters. Hunters are changing the world in many different ways, but that hunting is at the forefront. And so for me, my journey started obviously very early. So my dad and mom, we have three girls in the family. So my mom had asked my dad after I was born, do you want to try for one more and see if you get a boy? And dad said, no, she'll be just fine. She'll do, basically. And so from the time I was little, there's deer hanging in the backyard. I'm helping gut deer from the time I'm tiny. It didn't seem weird to me. Was just a part of regular life. I'd go trapping with dad. And sometimes he'd take me with him, which was fun from a very young age. But really where things started to change was when I was about 6 years old. Dad set me up with a 22 and asked me to target shoot and see how it went. And he set up this mushroom and had me shoot it. And he said if I got it, he'd get me an ice cream sundae. And so, of course, I was 6. I was super excited about that. And I took 3 shots, and Dad was like, didn't seem like it did anything. So he's like, all right, sweetie, that's okay. And we go up to it, and I had 3 holes in a pattern in the middle of the mushroom. So we knew that I was a good shot from the time I was little. And it's one of those things where it builds confidence in you as a kid when you're being successful at something. And for me, it was a really interesting journey, particularly as a woman, because as a woman, you're bombarded with a lot of different messages throughout your life. And I was very small as a child. So I tried sports as a little kid, and my dad always joked that he didn't think I'd be an athlete because he didn't think I could run. So there were a lot of things that I wasn't super great at from a young age. The only thing was singing and shooting were things that I was a natural at. And so you wouldn't guess that because my blog that I have actually is a jack of all trades, master of some. So the idea of I'm really passionate about doing as many different activities as possible. And as I grew up, I became a 3-sport athlete. I was in theater. I was a dancer for 17 years. I hunted, I fished, I did all these things. And really that confidence came after being good at shooting and being in the outdoors. And so I got a lot of messages through middle school, all of a sudden that hunting was weird and hunting wasn't cool, which was really hard for a middle school girl that just really wants, to fit in and be well liked. That's kind of, if you can get inside a preteen's brain, that's the ultimate thing that you want. And so that was really hard for me in the beginning. And I'm also pretty feminine. So I've always loved, dresses, and I have 2 sisters and, mani-pedis and all those kinds of things I love too. So I think growing up, I was under this impression that you could only have one way. You couldn't have both, right? Because I didn't have really female mentors that I felt showed me I could have both. So I grew up pretty conflicted between the camo life and the really feminine parts of me as well. And after my first big game hunt, which ended up wasn't a whitetail, because in New York State, when I was growing up, at the time you had to be 16 to hunt a whitetail. So I hunted little things. After I got my hunter safety course, I got a turkey. But my first big game animal was actually a red stag in New Zealand. And that totally changed everything for me. And, we'll talk about women in the outdoors and confidence and things like that. But to put it all in one space, I was still pretty small and pretty weak, at age I was just turned 13. And I went with other girls who were a lot bigger than me, a lot stronger than me, a lot tougher than me. And I had exercise-induced asthma at the time. And so I thought that was a really good excuse to be like, oh, having a really hard time on this mountain. I've got exercise-induced asthma. And my guide pulls out an inhaler and was like, you don't have an excuse. Like he was too.
Whoa.
Yeah. So
how'd you deal with that? I mean, that was in your face.
I know. I just was like, okay. So I had to really toughen up. And after I got the stag, I had to carry one of the whole legs down, which was practically my size at the time. I didn't hit my growth spurt until 15, I don't think. And that whole experience just made me so much tougher. And that same trip, my dad and I went and shot a wild goat in the same trip. And we kind of got a little lost for a while and had to carry it spit style on a stick over our shoulders. And I was just miserable. And I was like, Dad, this is so hard. I can't do it. And he's like, you have to. There's no choice. You're either you do it or you stay on the mountain, And those two experiences culminated in 1 week, totally changed me, made me so much tougher. I felt so confident when I accomplished them. And I came home and was pretty much a different kid.
Wow. Listeners, you're thinking about this and saying, well, Brooke, got put in a situation, and a lot of people would not get put in that situation, but the same thing could happen in the back 40.
Absolutely.
Or at your grandparents' farm in Western New York, or it doesn't matter. All of a sudden you realize, what was the saying? If it's to be, it's up to me, and you have to man up,
Yeah.
and you just have to man up, and you can say woman up too, I guess. But you just have to man up to the situation. And some people never get that opportunity to put themselves in that place. That's myself. I loved athletics because I just had to do it, or I'd get run over.
Right.
In football, it would hurt if I didn't bring it. And in track, I would lose. It was pretty cut and dry. There wasn't a well, better luck next time. Either did it or you didn't do it. And see, and what I'm trying to get across is hunting puts you in that place, and it could be quicker than any other situation, because some people wait till you get to work and get in a work situation, and they either got to do it or don't. They get fired. I mean, it's pretty easy.
Right.
They lose their job, and it's so refreshing to hear a young woman such as yourself that early on was exposed. And I guess that's the journey of hunting. It exposes you to so many situations. Forget about traveling halfway around the world, as a young person, but just getting out in the mountains, because the mountains, they don't care who you are. They don't care how much money you have, how smart you are. They're just going to take the best you that you are at the time. And
Absolutely.
Either going to let the mountain beat you, or you're going to at least become friends with the mountain, because you never conquer the mountain. Yeah, you can summit, and I get that, but you're never going to conquer that mountain, because at any time, if you travel enough, if in enough mountain situations, mountains can flat kill you.
Oh,
Easy.
absolutely.
They can flat kill you. So, it's just to hear that story and to be able to share this with thousands of young women that question those whispers, and you alluded to that. And I want to camp on that, because there's so many voices speaking into you. We know families are fractured in the United States. We know school systems have their own agenda. We know your peer groups. We know social media is ripe with, with people that just try to rip each other apart, especially women.
Oh,
Guys,
yeah.
not so much. If I have a grip and grin, I don't get too much grief. But if you go with a grip and grin with a stag from New Zealand, somebody might say, "You killed that. You got to be the lowest person on life." Has that ever happened to you?
Yes. I'm lucky. So our social media has had to grow super organically because I made a mistake when I created it many years ago. So we can't actually pay to advertise on our Facebook. Otherwise, we'd have to start all over, and I'm not willing to do that. So we've remained in this safe kind of bubble. And a lot of times, there were a few times actually I had to make my Instagram private because of some really nasty people on social media. And I am afraid of that. But at the same time, I've grown really tough skin about it because I live in that world of social media and I understand how many people are trolls, how many people don't actually care, how many people who get on there and say something rude but really don't even have a profile, so you can't even go see what they're all about. And so I have defended my way of life since probably sixth grade. I remember the first time somebody mentioned to me, it was a good friend of mine, and she was like, "Yeah, I don't really like that you do that." And I was like, "What?" And especially because where I grew up, I mean, it was pretty accepted. It was more when I went to college and have, grown up that I've really had to defend myself. And part of the whole package for me and actually with my husband, we're both young working professionals. We're educated. We've been all over the world, and we can really speak to the lifestyle without ruining it. Because I think one thing that we do as hunters sometimes we kind of hurt ourselves if we don't use those opportunities to educate. So if you only use it as an opportunity to hate back and forth with someone, you're not going to get anywhere. And it doesn't make us look good. But by taking the time to educate people, Mike and I have flipped a lot of people who were anti-hunters, at least into non-hunters who don't hate hunting.
How do you reach common ground? How do you do that?
Pretty much what works for me is I am a huge foodie, as I messaged you about, and I am a huge advocate for eating organic. So that has been great for the movement. This idea of, knowing where your meat comes from, going and harvesting it yourself. Most of the time, most people that I find nowadays that I encounter who don't eat meat pretty much are against factory farming. So I have quite a few friends who are vegetarian or vegan because they are not okay with the idea of factory farming. Now, that's not to say that farming is bad, but, a lot of messages about what goes into McDonald's and what goes into Tyson chicken nuggets and things like that has turned people away, or at least turned people to be like, hey, where is that coming from? I want to know. And same with even our vegetables and things like that. People want to know where their food comes from and that they're sourcing things in an environmentally friendly way. And so I have reached a lot of common ground. Actually, my roommate is a vegetarian, was raised vegetarian her entire life, and she eats meat that we bring home, which is pretty cool. And I've had a couple experiences like that. So really, the people that I've not been able to reach a common ground with, and I mostly am just like, hey, I understand why you wouldn't be okay with it if you've never been a part of it, right? So people where it's hard for some of us to imagine, but there are places where hunting is not even a conversation. So the idea, all they're going to hear is, oh, people kill animals for fun. That's terrible. Why would you do that? And so if you can take the time to educate people like that and say, this is why we do what we do, this is how money is used for conservation, you have to know everything, right? You need to know the whole circle of information instead of being like, probably my least favorite hunters comment back at Antihunters will be like, well, your brain isn't as big as mine because you don't eat meat, or something silly like that. And I'll be like, guys, that's not helping, because we do have the opportunity to change people's minds if you take the time and do your research and just explain to people and don't be a jerk about it either. That's the hard part, because sometimes it makes us really angry. Like, I used to get really mad at first because I just felt so attacked. But if I was able to kind of harness that anger and make it an educational moment, it would be better for everyone.
Well said. And the key thing that I talk about all the time is common ground, and to talk about sharing knowledge, or just, if the person's open, the transfer of knowledge and communicate in such a way that we're not threatened. And so many times, I remember people say, "You hunt?" I used to respond, "Yeah, I kill stuff." That's probably not the best way to, make friends and influence your neighbors. It definitely isn't. And now I say, yeah, I hunt and I travel all. I've traveled all over North America and visited so many different cultures. And plus, I got some great organic meat,
Mm-hmm.
for, I never bought any meat at all. And yeah, I love meat. I love, um, the buzzword. I have a friend, Sam Ayers, Living Country in the Cities, a podcaster. He's right in LA. I mean, Hollywood. He works in Hollywood.
Oh
And
my God.
he just talks to people all the time about, oh yeah, I have my own organic places to go. I get it all. And then I prep it on. So I know exactly, I can tell you to the square foot where that animal came from and what
Right.
it's been eating on. And people go, really? How does that work? And then he's got a conversation going.
Right.
And sometimes, we're our own worst enemies, and we get testosterone up, and where we shouldn't. We should. That's an interesting thing. Have you ever hunted? Did anybody in your family ever hunt? Get some background. Like you said, you don't know where they're coming from. And
Right.
people only know what they know.
Yes.
That's all. I mean, it sounds simple, but that's all they know is what their whole culture. And if they never had the culture of hunting in their family, then they need somebody to say, well, let's talk about it. Let's have a cup of coffee. Or better yet, why don't you come over and I've got some great steaks I'm going to cook on Saturday night. And this is venison, this is elk, this is moose, this is bear, whatever it is. And you go, this is pretty good. Yeah, that's what I eat. And I
Yeah.
don't go to the store.
Yep.
Your thoughts? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have for years fed, especially my college girlfriends. We all lived together. Whenever I cooked, I fed them venison, and after a while, they were like, "I don't even notice the difference," you know. Um, but and it was so interesting to see a couple of them go from like apprehensive about it to being like very supportive of our program and sharing the joys. Like, now I send them pictures when I get something, and they're actually excited about it genuinely because I've taught them why they should care, through conversation. I have only had probably two people that I've walked away from the conversation and been angry, and they were unreasonable. So pretty people, anti-hunters get, that word is so nasty, but really you can make anti-hunters non-hunters through education. Non-hunters who are supportive, because you need that just as much as you need people hunting. You need
Right.
people to support you.
Right. And I think it's just, it's the common ground that we know we've shared enough campfires with the other people. It doesn't matter who you are, where you came from. If you're around that campfire someplace in the world, it's common ground, and it's an unbelievable community. It really is.
It is, absolutely.
You think about one of the things you wanted to talk about, and we'll talk about women in the outdoors, but you mentioned early on, there you are, a young girl, 6 years old, dad gives her 22, says, see that mushroom and, take some shots and we'll have an ice cream cone or sundae after it. And you did it, but it created confidence because you achieved something.
Right. That is Dad's whole mission. And I actually talked to him on the phone today before we were going to talk, because I always ask him, how did the kids do and how did they change? Because his whole thing with the trips is that they are worldwide and they are for at least a week to 10 days. And he said the greatest change in the kids is confidence. And this kid who just went on the New Zealand trip, Dad was like, he's a different kid. I can't believe the confidence that this kid has in himself, because you are accomplishing something. And so Dad's biggest mission is, he says, some older hunters will say, oh, well, the kid can't get something on the first try. They need to work really hard for it. And Dad, agrees, but at the same time believes that if you make it too hard from the beginning, kids will lose interest and will go find something else. There's too many other things to compete with. And so if you want to get kids into hunting, you need to make it a good experience, not set them up, not tie something up and set it up for them. But the idea is that hopefully you do work with them to make it, a good experience that they enjoyed and that they felt successful at, so that they build that confidence in themselves, so that they aren't going out 20 times and, sitting through the cold and they don't ever even see anything. And then they just kind of feel like, a bit of a failure, or that they're unlucky or whatever it is. And so confidence is, I think, the number one thing that kids can achieve through hunting. And for me personally, like I said, so I changed from being what I think I was kind of mediocre at a lot of things before hunting. And I became really good at a lot of things after hunting for a variety of reasons. I got to travel the world and see different cultures and understand how other people live. Two, I was successful at something. So again, shooting, I was always really good at, and I aim to only ever shoot an animal once. That's always my hope, is that I can take him down with one shot, for many reasons. And I feel my success can feel contingent on that sometimes. And then when you work really hard for something, so okay, you've got confidence built, you've started in the hunting community, maybe you've gone after some small game and been successful. Now you're willing to put in the work for something greater and bigger, and put the time and the effort to be successful. And then when you are successful, it just feels so much greater because you have worked so hard. But I think you have to build that foundation with kids first. You can't just be like, well, life's hard and this is going to be hard and you're going to like it.
Wow, you just said a lot right there, because it is the situation, and we mentioned it before, about putting yourself into the place to succeed at something.
Right.
And life is a steps of a building block, because think of all the famous football athletes. Doesn't have to be football, any athlete. They didn't start being the number one person in the world. You watch a great golfer, and they didn't start doing that, but they did it repetition. Success builds on success. And that's why so many athletic programs, especially in high school and college, they have a formula for success, because it's bred into what everybody, the expectations, and then they have it down that if you go to in Colorado, there's the school in Denver that has won so many championships. It's a private school, but when you go there, you're expected to win. Right. And sometimes that's good, and sometimes that can blow up in your face, because if you don't meet the expectations, then there's hard things to come from. But if the expectations are set in the right way, and I think hunting is just it's a pure endeavor, if you will, because it's you in the mountains, you in the plains, you someplace, and trying to figure out how to outwit this buck that lives on 40 acres. Right. And that can take a lifetime. That can take a lot to do, but it's the challenge. See, let's take a little break here and ask this. I'd like to ask this of all my guests. So you're a young woman, and you know a lot. You've traveled a lot, but what would you say is the one big thing that you wish you knew 5 years ago that you know now in regards to hunting?
Okay, let's see. 5 years ago in regards to hunting. So before 5 years ago, yes. So that's actually that's a good number, because it was around that time 5 years ago that I got my award, and the year I got my award was the same year that around the same time that the Sandy Hook school shooting happened, and very quickly. After that happened, and I knew that I was going to get my award in January, my dad was like, you need to step up your knowledge base. And in regards to understanding why we hunt, it's one of those things that when you grow up, when you're lucky enough to grow up with it, things are ingrained. Things just make sense naturally. But that's when I really had to kick it into gear and say, this is why I do what I do, because my way of life is going to be threatened, right? And so I would have told myself long ago to begin to understand that at a younger age, because it really took through my early 20s to understand the whole circle of knowledge. So I would encourage younger people, younger hunters, if you want to see this way of life continue, you need to educate yourself in our world. So whether that be understanding the economy, understanding conservation, things like that, you need to know your stuff, because otherwise you won't be able to use those educational moments. You'll just be another person in the crowd screaming insults at people who don't know why you do what you do.
Thanks for that. So let's switch it up. Let's talk about your favorite hunt up until age 15, and then we'll do till age 20, and then we'll do the age 25. So okay. 3 favorite hunts.
Okay. So one I was really proud of. So I wasn't able to get a whitetail deer, I don't think, until I was 16. So one of my favorite hunts, I was in 8th grade, and this was the year following the red stag hunt that we talked about. So I actually called in a turkey by myself and shot it. And it was so exciting. And you know how turkeys are. Like, it just gets you so riled up when you're calling back and forth. And I could use a mouth call at the time pretty well. And this bird comes into view. I was sitting on a tree. It was a beautiful day. Kind of this opening in the forest. And Dad was behind me filming. And all I ever wanted when I was growing up is I really want to impress Dad by doing it all by myself, and it's hard because hunting is kind of a group effort sometimes, especially when you're on such large tracts of land like at home. And so this bird comes in, it's gobbling. The gobble sounds younger, but, it didn't sound like a beastly old Tom, but it comes into view, and I'm so excited. I can't believe that I've called it in myself. I shoot it. Turns out it was a bearded hen that was gobbling. Yeah. Gobbling.
Oh my goodness.
Crazy. Like, you would never know. You would never know. It was absolutely insane. And she had 2 beards.
Oh my goodness.
I know. So
that's legal. I mean, that's legal, right?
Yep. It's a bearded bird. So that's why I shot it, because I'm like, oh wow, look, it's got a great beard. Because it was, it wasn't in like a full puffy strut when it came in. It was walking and kind of was smoothed down, and then it had the beard.
Yeah.
But it had 2 beards.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So that was a really funny one.
And you had that on film too, right?
Yeah. Yep. We got that on film. Unfortunately, film has changed so much since then. So a lot of our stuff that we filmed back then, you couldn't put on TV now, So that was probably one of my favorites when I was young. I mean, the big game stuff I was absolutely in love with. And then you said, or did you want to?
Well, let's talk about your first whitetail. Let's talk about your first whitetail.
Okay. So I'd like to talk about 2 whitetails quick, because my first whitetail, again, I had to go around the world to shoot big game, because you have to, at the time you had to be 16, and I think they moved it maybe to 15. Like I was on the cusp there, and now I think it's 14, if I'm correct, in New York State, but it's still higher than a lot of other states. And it was a really cool short hunt, actually. I have put in the hours, man. I mean, I have done, 13-hour days in a blind, freezing cold, numb toes, things like that. And this was one of those like really pleasant short hunts after school. And my dad came rushing home after school and was like, get your gear. There's a buck right out kind of in the open on our property. And I was like, oh my gosh. Okay. So, we get all geared up. We go, we put on a stalk, and he's still there. And it was just one of those that kind of felt like it was meant to be, because it was like he waited an hour from the time Dad
What?
was there, came and got me. We came back. We did a stalk. He's still there. And he gave me a perfect broadside shot, and I knocked him right down right there, one shot. And he was a 5-point buck, and he was actually injured, which is why he was hanging around that spot. He had like an arrow through the back leg. So he wasn't like totally crippled, like he couldn't walk, but he wasn't doing
He was hurting.
great. Probably
Right,
would
he
have
was
struggled
hurting.
through the winter. So we were super excited about that. So that was my first whitetail. I was very proud of that. And then my
That was
biggest,
with a rifle?
yes.
That-
So I use a 7mm08 Savage for everything, pretty much. We can rifle hunt deer at home, but there's a lot of places around us you can't. You have to use a shotgun. So I've always loved rifle hunting just because I feel like it doesn't pressure the deer in the same way. But some people have no choice. There's some counties you can't. My husband grew up, you could only use shotgun. So, and then we were lucky to gain access to land near us, a friend's property who lets us hunt. They have big deer every year, big for us especially. And my whole thing was I just want to take an 8-point, a nice 8-point, because we want to practice quality deer management. And so it was my junior year of college, and I'd gotten great 8-points, great for me, but they weren't like a special class or anything. And the deer picture I sent you is the deer I'm speaking of. We called it the mammoth, and we were in a huge blind, putting in the hours in the snow. It's freezing, and it was always at magic time, so right around when the deer are coming out in the field. And we had multiple windows to open and close that had pictures of human shadows on them. So they always think that there's a person standing it looks like a person's always standing in the windows. So they're not like confused. And we saw this 8-point come into view, and he was a decent looking 8-point, and we were super excited. So we had to close this window and then open the other window. And while in the process of opening the second window, the deer actually switched places, and this giant deer comes into view. He was 140 class, and we had no idea. I stopped looking at the antlers so I wouldn't be so nervous. Had no idea they had switched in between the windows, and I shoot this gigantic deer, have no idea because I'm not looking at the antlers. And Dad's like, oh, it's a great 8-point. It's going to be awesome. And we walk up to the deer. He went right inside the woods. We walk up to him, and we're like, I have never encountered a deer this big in my life. Had no idea because I was just trying to put a good shot on it. I could sit between the antlers. I mean, it was the widest deer I'd ever seen.
So let me get this straight. So you're in the blind. Is it a box blind or pop up?
It's a box.
So you're in the box blind and you see this deer and say, oh yeah, okay, we're going to kill this one, but we've got to shut this window and go here. Between the time of opening and closing the windows, Mr. Wonderful walks out. You don't even know it's Mr. Wonderful, and
right.
You drill him.
Yes. And I become a different human being when I am centered in on that rifle. Like, I am so practiced in my breathing and like almost meditating, like trying to be calm, because if I think that if it looks really big, I'm going to probably start to, hyperventilate and not be able to deal with it. So I just was like, okay, cool. We know he's good. We checked. He's an 8-point. I'm just going to focus on my shot. And then Dad's on the camera. So yeah, he can see the deer, but not see how giant he is, because we'd already seen him. So we're just focused on doing our thing. And then, yeah.
Let's see if we can find that. Let's see if we can find that that picture. No, not going to work. No. I didn't think about having it queued up, but anyway, it'll be in. Yeah, it'll be in the podcast. So for the last 5 or 6 years, 10 years ish, my friend Kirsty Pike started Proas just over 10 years ago. So for the last 10 years, women have been the fastest growing segment in the outdoor industry. It could be from kayaking to, free climbing, mountaineering, whatever, and hunting and fishing. And why is that? Why do you think women have just, overshadowed? It's not even close. They're just kicking butt.
Right. I actually just finished Eva Shockey's book about a week ago, and she talks about this. There was a huge surge, particularly in archery for females, because of Katniss Everdeen in the Hunger Games. There was this national excitement about the idea of hunting being in a blockbuster film and, it being a normal, understandable part of life. And Eva was talking about how Katniss really inspired a lot of girls in a big way at the time. But also, I feel like women are so much more encouraged now to do what are considered masculine activities in a big way, and that has changed a lot. Female empowerment, those kinds of things. Whereas men, when I was growing up, I didn't know a lot of female hunting mentors. Now there are a lot out there for young girls.
And here's Eva's book right here.
Yep, Taking Aim. Yep.
So, folks, if you can see that, ladies, it's worth the read. Guys, it's worth the read. Not just because her name's Eva Shockey, but there's really some good nuggets in here. And talk about sharing knowledge and the hunting experience. Great book.
Eva, I loved reading her book because so much of the experience felt similar between her and I and her dad and my dad. And actually, Eva and I met multiple times. Jim presented me my award back in 2013, and I didn't even know who Eva was yet. I was just so kind of starstruck meeting Jim. And Eva popped up and was like, "Hey, we should go hunting sometime." And we emailed back and forth for about a week, and then not long after that, remember both her grandfathers died, and she pretty much blew up right after that. So she went through the grieving phase there and really blew up and became super popular after that. And we just never made it happen. But I have watched her grow ever since then. From I didn't know who she was to she's the biggest female in the industry. Which has been really amazing. And I'm just so excited that little girls, have someone on that level who, again, teaches girls they can be feminine and they can be hunters. And it's not a mutually exclusive thing.
No, and like Kirsty Pike, when she started with Proas, she was sick and tired of wearing men's clothes. That was the drill. Steve, her husband, she would just get stuff from him or whatever. And, it was just like, stop. It's not cut right. It doesn't fit me right. If I'm going to hunt all day, hunt hard, I need something that's going to work for my body.
Right, exactly.
And it's a huge, huge industry. Not only that, but the TV shows, Lee and Tiffany, husband and wife.
Absolutely.
But, more and more TV shows where women are the star of the show.
Yes, 100%.
And so, and you get a lot of film time on your own show. What advice you give the ladies when they reach out to you and say, I'm not a hunter. I want to be a hunter. And enamored by the lifestyle. What do you tell them?
So I've actually had the privilege to take, through our program, we also do focus on women, on getting women in the outdoors. And I've had the privilege to be on some of those hunts and actually have taken one of my college girlfriends to take her first animal. And I've had a couple girls, be like, how can I do this without, a mentor? Because a lot of the women that I know or that I've helped have had the mentors through our program to help them become hunters. But if you're in the middle of the city, it's not so easy, right? And so a lot of the times what I will direct people to first and foremost is, if you are serious about it, you got to get your hunter safety, because I can't, there's nothing I can do before that. And so I've sent a lot of people that way. And at home we have female leaders who run our hunter safety courses. A lot of them are interested in archery, so I'll talk to them about, okay, hunter safety first, then let's go to a range, let's go to an archery club, and do that first. I've got friends here right now asking me to do that, so we have plans to take them to a rifle range and the archery club, just to see, would you even be comfortable? Because a lot of people that you're talking about in this light probably have never shot a gun or a bow and arrow to begin with. And then as far as women in particular wanting to be a part of the lifestyle, I would just want to tell them that you can be both. You can be a huntress. You do not have to be people will look at me sometimes and say, you don't look like a hunter. And I'm like, what do you think a hunter looks like? Is probably the first thing I'll ask.
Great question.
Yeah,
Great question.
What do you really think a hunter is supposed to look like? Do you think they look like cave people? Like that always cracks me up. And so the idea that, ladies, you can live an outdoor lifestyle and still be a girl. It's okay.
That's for sure. We're going to wrap up the show and talk about some of the lessons learned. We've touched briefly on a lot of them. If you had to take 3 lessons that you've learned, and that'll summarize the show, but let's share that.
Okay. So I wrote down kind of life lessons through hunting in general, but also, whitetail specifically. Number 1 is endurance. So I feel like in our ever-changing world, we have the ability to change our minds a lot and do lots of different activities. So if something is too hard or something's going too slow, we'll just move on to something else, right? And so this idea through hunting that it teaches you endurance of your mind and endurance of your body is something I think is really important for the kids that are going to be growing up in this very technologically advanced world where we're just moving so fast, right? And so that can be, if you want to think about it mentally and physically, hunting makes you sometimes really cold, like colder than you've ever been in your life, and you might have to sit in it for 13 hours. It can make you really bored if you're not seeing anything and you have to sit. It can also be extremely grueling if you are spot and stalk hunting somewhere that's really tough. My favorite hunt to talk about was my tar hunt in New Zealand in 2014. I hiked 20 miles on the side of a mountain and had to carry him on my back. And I wanted to give up most of the time. I wanted to cry. At one point, I always joke, we made it down, this valley. We were probably 30 yards from camp. I have this goat on my back, and I have hiked 20 miles, and I was so spent, and I fell because I have all this weight on my back, and I fell in the water, and I just told my dad to leave me there, and I was very serious, tears, everything, and I just was like, just kill me, like, just leave me here. And my dad's like, Brooke, it is 30 yards that way. And I was like, I don't care. I'm not getting up one more time because I was just so spent. And I had been stuck on a scree field. Like I almost went down a mountain on a scree field because I had to crawl sideways across the scree field. I'd never been more terrified. And at the end of the day, when we finished it up, I felt so accomplished. And our guides in New Zealand that we absolutely love just were like, yeah, you just become so mentally tough that you can just handle it, because you're going to have to get up and do this all again tomorrow, which made me want to cry even more. I think that was a really amazing lesson for me, that you just have to endure. You have to mentally and physically endure things that other people don't. And that's okay, because I think it makes you a better person. That would be 1.
Yes.
Yeah. 2 would be respect for life. So one of the things that I've had within me since I was young is I really did struggle with the killing aspect of hunting. I am a super empathetic person. And I go fishing all the time, and I still sometimes feel sad when I have to hook a hook through a worm and see him like writhe in pain. And and I know it's just a worm, but for me, I've always had this really intense respect for life. And my dad taught me through hunting how to honor, an animal that has given its body to sustain you, in a very spiritual way. And Dad used to make us do a Native American tradition of eating a piece of raw liver or heart from big game animals on site. I've done that 6 times. It is awful. But to basically be like, you need to suffer too, because you've, taken this life and you need to appreciate it. And I have walked away. I have missed opportunities to kill an animal because I didn't feel it was an ethical situation. And therefore I have let some things walk. I don't have a black bear yet. And I hunted very hard backpack hunting in Alaska with my dad. And the only shots I had was a small bear, which I said absolutely not to. And then a bear who only presented me basically about, across the Adam's apple, which could have been okay. But I felt that I couldn't make a great shot. And therefore I wasn't going to try on that shot, because it was not only would it probably wound and hurt the animal, but then now I've got an angry bear that I shot and I'm in the middle of the wilderness and I'm going to have to deal with. I've had multiple occasions with that. I will not. That's why most of the time I shoot an animal with one shot, because I refuse to take something I think is too risky if it's going to harm an animal who I'm trying to ethically take out, essentially. Because I just respect their life so much.
And let's end with your third one.
All right. And then, so that's going right off of what I just said. I believe that you should put 100% in your first shot. And I think that can be applied to your entire life. So why would you do anything if you're not going to do it 100%? Has been my dad's motto my entire life. So don't just half-ass anything. Always try your best. To do your very best in whatever activity it is, whether it's sports, music, a job interview. Always put 100% in your first shot, because you have no idea, what opportunities that could open for you. Or in the case of hunting, hopefully puts your animal on the ground so that you don't have to spend the next day chasing it around or chasing a blood trail.
Well, Brooke, this has just been a joy. You've laid out a lot of content, great information. We've touched on a lot of places, and I can't wait to get your dad on the show. Absolutely. And with that, on behalf of hundreds of thousands of listeners across North America, thank you so much for being a guest on Whitetail Rendezvous.
Thank you for having me.
Ever wonder what education can do? Well, Brooke Dzara and her dad, Scott Jordan, have figured out over the last 10 years that students want to be outdoors, they want to be engaged, and they want to have projects, and they want to go big or go home. What's all this pointing to was a special project out at CRCS, and you'll find out what those letters stand for during the show. But it's a secondary school where students came to Dr. Scott Jordan and said, we want to do something. And so they created a trout pond. We'd want to do something. So they created a deer observation area. They wanted to do something. So they went and traveled the world and looked at environmental impact, especially in the hunting and the outdoors. This is a very special program. Brooke and her dad are well known throughout the world for the work they're doing with mentoring and educating kids. That's what it's all about, folks. That's our recruitment, and they're doing it second to none. Stay tuned. Great show.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.